We will move to item 3, which is the audit of APD body cameras that looked at whether Austin police officers are using body-worn cameras in accordance with APD policies, state law, and best practice guidance.
Thank you.
Good morning.
This audit was managed by Katie Houston and led by Cameron Legron. Cameron will be making the presentation this morning.
Good morning. Yes, let me get set up for a second. The body camera's on. Yeah. Okay, good morning. As Corey said, I'll be doing our presentation for our audit of Austin Police Department's body-worn camera program. The Austin Police Department started its body-worn camera program in 2015 to increase transparency and accountability in its interactions with the public. As of April 2019, all sworn APD officers, excluding commanders and chiefs, have been assigned a body camera. The cameras, as you can see, The cameras, as you can see on this slide, are attached to an officer's uniform with a clip and are placed on the center of the officer's chest to capture their field of vision. Videos are started either automatically when an officer opens up their car door or when an officer pushes the event button in the middle of the device. Officers stop the video manually at the end of the incident by holding the event button. APD has policies in place for the body-worn camera program that generally align with state law and best practice. To set up the program, APD purchased cameras and set up docks at all substations, which you can see on the slide. Officers have been trained on policies, use of cameras, and how to upload their videos to APD's cloud storage site. APD has also identified issues and corrected them throughout the short history of the program. For example, they've purchased new mounts after officers reported their cameras being easily knocked off with the original mounts. We reviewed 151 body-worn camera videos taken by APD officers and found that officers are generally using their body cameras according to policy. As you can see on the slide, cameras were placed correctly and stayed attached on officers' uniforms, and they continue to operate in inclement weather in 100% of videos, and in 99% the camera recorded audio for the entire video. However, we also found that APD supervisors have not been conducting inspections of their officers' body-worn camera videos. We reviewed video audit logs for the 151 videos we reviewed and found that only one of those videos had been viewed by a supervisor. Also, in a memo to APD leadership, patrol supervisors stated that they thought body camera and dash cam video reviews were redundant and that they never identified any officer wrongdoing. However, our video review identified several issues, for example, which you can see on this slide. For example, 3% of videos did not start at the beginning of the incident, and 4% of videos stopped before the end of the incident. As a result, there's not a complete picture of the officer's involvement with the incident, and a full evaluation of that officer's performance cannot be completed. Without this supervisory inspection, these issues may continue to go undetected and uncorrected, compromising the effectiveness of the program and APD's relationship with the public. Various groups have been involved in setting up APD's body-worn camera program, but APD does not have oversight processes to continuously monitor the program from a department-wide perspective. The department also doesn't have performance measures or program goals for this program. Some examples of those program goals could be the number of videos available for calls or the number of videos uploaded without a case number or category. Best practice recommends that departments collect and release this data to promote transparency and trust and to identify areas for program improvement. Our second finding was that APD staff do not track the number of information requests the department receives for body-worn camera video or the number of body camera videos released or withheld. We reviewed a couple recent examples of information requests and found that the department complied with state law, and staff reported that they're working with the vendor of their information request site to add this tracking functionality. The 2018 agreement with the Austin Police Association said that the Office of Police Oversight will have access to confidential police department files, including body camera video. As of February 2019, OPO can access this video through APD internal affairs staff. OPO will use the videos in response to complaints against officers and to periodically assess body camera use. We issued 3 recommendations to make sure that the supervisor inspections are taking place, to designate an individual to provide program oversight, and to regularly report on information requests. APD agreed with these recommendations. Thanks.
APD, would you like to make any comments?
I'm not sure if this, there. Okay, there we go. Mayor and Council, good morning. My name is Joseph Chucko, and I'm one of the Assistant Chiefs. This is Commander Brent Dupree, who is our Commander over Intelligence, also our Police Technology Unit. And that Police Technology Unit has been primarily responsible for the rollout of the body-worn cameras. As the Auditor's Office said, we began the program in 2015. We didn't actually start rolling out the cameras until October of 2017, and we completed that rollout approximately 1 year later, in about in the last quarter of 2018. We've had some growing pains, and as the audit showed, there were a few things that we can certainly improve upon. I do want to highlight a couple of I think are some of the bigger points that the Auditor's Office is making. First of all, with regard to the statement in the report that says that APD supervisors have not been conducting inspections. I'm not sure how many supervisors that the City Auditor's Office actually spoke to. I know they found at least one that was holding off on conducting the audits due to the fact that we were in the process of retooling our complete audit process for all the different audits that we do. So on a quarterly basis, we not only audit body-worn camera, but our digital mobile audio video, or DMAV video, that's the in-car video. They will look at things like their vehicles, their equipment that's on their belt, their tasers, their weapons themselves, the handguns. They look at a lot of different things on a quarterly basis for every single officer, and we were incorporating all of that into one process. So while we never explicitly told our folks to continue the audits, they took that to mean that we were in the process of redoing our audit process and to just hold off. So there were many supervisors who in fact were conducting random audits during the time that the city auditors were examining. And so, obviously we have already shored up making sure that everyone is conducting quarterly audits. We completely redid the form that risk management now monitors and makes sure that those audits are taking place. With regards to videos, and if we could go back to the slide that has the actual numbers on it. There you go. So with regard to the videos that the City Auditor's Office identified, I kind of want to point out that since the program began, as of April of 2019, we've uploaded over 2 million videos. Currently sitting in storage today is almost 1.1 million videos. So they looked at a very small fraction, 151 videos, which were not the subject of a complaint or some other action such as a response to resistance that necessarily would have a supervisor looking at those videos. Most of the videos that we have sit in storage so that should we need to review them, they're there. And we retain them at least for 181 days to make sure that if it's an object of a complaint that is going to go to internal affairs that could be subject to the restrictions of civil service time, that we're retaining it for that entire period. We also have measures in place to ensure that if it's tied to a criminal case, that it is retained for the statute of limitations of that criminal case. Most of those it's necessary for an officer to go in as soon as he finishes the call to go into his city-issued cell phone to categorize the video and to make sure that it gets uploaded properly. Sometimes officers will go in and they'll enter the case number incorrectly. They'll transpose numbers or do something else. Or they get called off of a call very quickly and they go to another call, and so they don't get back to this call immediately. And of course, with 1,900 people using these cameras, we're going to see some mistakes that are made. In order to mitigate those mistakes, we worked with the vendor for an integration process for every single video. So if a video is not categorized, it's automatically ingested and it's tagged based on what the CAD call was. And so sometimes that's correct and sometimes it's not. We did see some officers who thought that the integration is taking care of it. I don't need to do anything further. We're in the process of remedying that to make sure that officers understand the primary way of tagging these videos is the officers doing it, not the integration. The integration is a backup plan. So all that to say that I think that when we look at the numbers that are up here, at 4% and 5%, 11%, these are pretty small numbers compared to the actual number of videos that were looked at. Sometimes as small as 4 videos or 6 videos that they looked at of 151, in which they identified that sometimes a 30-second pre-record did not occur. We're still working. I think that we're still experiencing some growing pains with the program because it is a new program. We have seen some hardware and software issues, and we report that to the vendor, and we're constantly working with the vendor to make sure that those get remedied. We also have seen some officers that didn't do it exactly the way that we had prescribed, and so working through our training methods to make sure that we're pushing out bulletins, we're getting our officers into ongoing training to make sure that they're doing it correctly when we see that they've not done it correctly, is how we're taking care of those issues. What I'll go ahead and close with is that our body-worn camera has been held up both by the Department of Justice and by the vendor as a model program. We've been highlighted in various conferences as the way that a body-worn camera program should be done. Everything from how we started the program and the engagement we had with the community to talk about what we're trying to accomplish with the body-worn camera program, all the way through full implementation and how we are overall managing the program. We did agree with all of the recommendations that were made by the city auditor's office, in that the first one being to provide quarterly reports to executive staff. We've initiated that process through our risk management division, and the first report will come out next month. The second one being having some kind of an oversight to look at developing metrics and program goals. We're in the process of doing that and hope to have that in place by August the 1st. And then finally, on how we track our public information requests through our public information office. We worked with the city vendor on this, GovQA, to make some changes to the software so that it's much more easily accessible information for our staff to be able to respond to these kind of requests.
Thank you. Appreciate the additional information. Councilmember Poole, I think you have a first question.
Yeah, first I want to thank the auditors for coming in and looking at this program. This was a program that has garnered a lot of public attention, and I thought it was really important that we go in and see how the early days of the adoption of the body-worn cameras would roll out and whether there would be any issues that might show up at the front end so we could address them. And I also want to thank the officers for their diligence in the training and adopting these new procedures and understanding the motivations behind it, because it benefits all of us to know what's happening on the street. I did want to suggest that with regard to the review of the tapings of the recordings, which I understand happened hardly at all, is that correct? In the audit that you found that the recordings were not reviewed?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
So on the one hand, I would say these numbers aren't super high. I agree with you on that. On the other hand, I think that had the recordings been reviewed from the very beginning, a sampling of them, if they had been reviewed, my guess is that the numbers wouldn't be that high. I think they would have been lower, and I think that the training that that is necessary as a result of the audit, where the covering up of the body-worn camera, the zipping. I understand you now have some outerwear that only zips up as far as where the camera is located. I think that we may have been even more nimble in identifying these shortcomings. Again, agreeing that there's not a large number, but that number could have been even lower if we had done the reviews that I think were anticipated and expected by staff. Any thoughts on that?
Council member, I appreciate that. What I will point out is that the changing of what we noticed ourselves outside of this audit was that, yes, we were sometimes covering the camera up with outer layers of clothing. So to remedy that, we started issuing a second body-worn camera mount to officers so that during the cold season they could go ahead and mount that to their outer jacket. Mm-hmm. And then when they put the jacket on, quickly take the camera off of one mount and stick it on the other. So that remedied that. Also, our old style of traffic vest was actually one you threw over your head and did not have any kind of thing in the middle to open up. So we changed that and we issued new traffic vests that now zip up in the front, and they just zip them up right to the bottom of the camera. Mm-hmm. So it still stays on. The officer still has that layer of protection, but we're not missing that video. So these are things, obviously, that it certainly would have been good to know at the very outset. But as the program has come along over the last basically 8 months since full implementation, we've been making a lot of changes.
And then just my last follow-up question on that topic. What sort of a review procedure and protocol will you now follow?
So what we now do is we have a fully integrated and kind of organized audit procedure that our supervisors, our street-level supervisors, are doing for all of their folks. And that includes, on a quarterly basis, to look at a number of their videos, both in-car and body-worn camera video, to determine a number of things. Are they turning it on and off when they're supposed to? Are they doing what we call a 1041 check, which is right at the beginning of shift? They're supposed to check the camera, make sure that it has full functionality, play that back for themselves to make sure that it's working. Did they do that? And not just to make sure that the camera's turned on and off correctly, but what are they seeing on the camera? They're monitoring their officers' behaviors to make sure that we're not taking part in any kind of racially based or motivated kind of behavior, to make sure that we're looking at all aspects basically of what the camera's capturing
and making sure the camera works properly. Is that going to be a part of like the performance reviews that you do with the officers?
It is.
As far as what you see on your reviews of the camera recording.
Yeah. So the plan is I've gone ahead and had the commander over our risk management division to head up a work group. It will be composed of various levels of ranks in our organization to figure out what are these performance goals and our metrics going to be. So the group will be formed within about the next month and begin that work, and we'd certainly be, we stand ready to report back to council on how that work goes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember Flanagan.
So, I have kind of a more rosy view of this audit. I mean, I'm seeing things like 100% of the time it was placed correctly, and 100% of the time it continued operating, and 99% of the time the audio was still running. So, I want to thank you and the department for fairly quickly adopting a new technology. It's not always easy to do that. The police department is not a software development company where technologies need to be and can be expected to be adapted at the snap of a finger. Obviously, there's room for improvement here, and I know that you all are going to make that improvement. And thank you to the auditor's office for kind of calling out where those areas of improvement are, but also where things are going well. And so I just wanted to thank you all for that. And I would encourage the management to consider whether or not maybe civilian review is more effective than having kind of the very highly paid, trained officers sitting in front of a computer reviewing video. Maybe it should be someone else, maybe an extension of the OPO, the Police Oversight Office. That might be a better use of resources in order to get more of these videos reviewed, and then they could kick them up to supervisors for action, obviously, but at least getting that review might be better done by civilian staff.
Mayor Adler.
I want to join with Councilmember Flanagan. I think we rolled this out pretty early in the process, and at that point, the use of body cameras required a real cultural change. And I know that there were a lot of forces around the country that were reacting to the technology very differently, and this was a really embracing community. Both chiefs that oversaw that saw that as an opportunity to protect and to inform our officers, and I think that was really the right way to look at it. So I also want to compliment you on that. It's also interesting to note, one, I think the numbers are all real strong, but it's that one incident that happens when a camera's turned off that then becomes a defining moment. We see that happening right now in South Bend, Indiana. Do we know why? And I know it's a small number, but even a small number, if it happens to be the time when something happens, will be an overriding number. Do we know why that 4% number exists? Why cameras aren't on when they should be?
Well, I want to thank both council members for recognizing that, and we certainly appreciate that. We feel like we've done a pretty decent job of rolling this program out. As far as the small numbers go, Mayor, I would say that the 4% that we're seeing and the 3%, there was a number. 3% were not activated at the beginning of the incident. 4% did not record to the end of an incident, and then 4% had an obstruction in front of the body-worn camera lens. And I'll start with the last one. The body-worn camera lens sits directly in front of their chest. The city auditor did see that occasionally something would pass in front of it, so that for a second it's obstructed, but these were ones where they saw an obstruction for a longer period of time. And in one in particular that I can remember, the officer had tucked his ticket writing device underneath his arm and was writing out something, and so his arm was actually blocking the camera lens. It's tough to, no matter where we place it on our bodies, that we're going to guarantee 100% of the time that is not going to be obstructed in some way. But we do, what we wanted to do was, when it was unobstructed, we wanted that camera to have the very best, capture the very best video that it could, and so we felt it was really important to put it right here in the middle of the chest. As far as the videos that were not activated or did not record to the end of an incident, a fraction of those, and I couldn't give you the exact number, there were software issues or some kind of a hardware issue. But most of them is because of human error, and that officers would either not activate it in a timely manner or they deactivated it prematurely. And as we find those, and occasionally we will find them on our own outside of an audit or by the city auditor's office through one of our own audits, we address it individually with the officer to make sure that, to find out, why did you turn this camera off? We haven't found the case yet where they didn't have a pretty good excuse for why they did it. And then we take that as a training opportunity to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Those same stories, we take out the names and we highlight them in our trainings for brand new officers that are learning how to use body-worn cameras, to say, please don't make these mistakes. So it's kind of an evolution in the training to make sure that we're really keeping those human errors to a small number.
Okay, and I think that's good, and to use it as a training opportunity. In Indiana, there was some confusion about when and what was the protocol for turning on the cameras. And I know that in some instances that happens automatically by virtue of the technology. Is our policy that the cameras are turned on whenever there's an interaction with someone in the public, except for those instances when, for privacy reasons, cameras are not supposed to be on?
So our policy is that if an officer is having interaction with anyone, that their camera should be on. That we have 7 different triggers inside of a vehicle to where when they're getting out of a vehicle or they exceed a certain speed, they brake very rapidly, or a number of different things happen that the body-worn camera and the in-car camera both will automatically turn on. So what we're trying to do is set them up for success so that we're not depending on them to activate that camera. Sometimes what will happen is that an officer exits the vehicle, the camera turns on, they handle the call, they think the call is done, and then they deactivate the camera. And it turns out that that call was not done. And so as they go to either reactivate the camera or they forget, we lose video. We lose video in pre-record, or we lose video altogether because they got distracted with what was going on and weren't thinking about a camera. So but those are very, very small numbers. We also set it up to where a Bluetooth burst comes out from as a car is pulling up, and that car door is open. If officers that are standing there, their camera is not activated, that Bluetooth burst will activate those cameras. We've done everything that we can to make sure that those cameras are on as much as possible.
Okay. 2 other issues real quickly. The first one that you talked about, which was the backlog and processing the videos. I think the newspaper article indicated up to a 10-month delay in potentially getting cameras to prosecutors. And you said that you were looking at that and trying to figure out ways to do that. I mean, Mr. Flanagan suggested as part of that, if there's a way to make that more administrative or more clerical, that then someone then helps officers so that to get that done. I think that's an important thing to continue working on. And then the last thing, if you would comment on it, is the relationship between body cameras and the federal programs. We have a policy to turn on our cameras. It sounds as if some of the joint task force with the federal government, heretofore we've been following our policies and procedures in those instances, but it sounds like the federal's government has raised some issue with that. Could you talk about that?
Sure. So the federal government has, with respect to any law enforcement action that they're taking in the field, has their own rules saying that body-worn cameras will not be worn. Our deputized task force officers that sit on those task forces have to abide by the federal regulations and rules. So we've been in discussion for over a year now with the Department of Justice about our desire to have our folks, we're not going to mandate obviously what their folks do, but our folks that participate will use their cameras. We have not come to terms on that yet. A number of departments across this country are struggling with that right now and are trying. As a matter of fact, I think Atlanta was the one who pulled their task force officers off of those task forces until they could use body-worn cameras. And we have the same fear that something is going to happen. It's not going to be captured on video, and there will always be questions. We certainly don't want that to happen, but we don't want to pull officers off of task forces either, because that doesn't make our city any safer. There's a number of task forces that we participate on, and specifically I'm thinking about the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force through the Marshal Service, in which those folks are apprehending some of the most violent criminals that are out there. And we don't want to deplete that or take it completely offline, because we have a number of folks that participate.
Well, everything that you can do to continue those, because again, that's going to be the one time that something happens, and the impact on trust, which also impacts safety in our community, will take a significant hit when and if that ultimately happens. So thank you for the continued advocacy on that issue.
Councilmember Tilla.
Yeah, my comments are very much in line with those that have come before. I think for a brand new program, these are really good, very strong results, and so I appreciate all of the officers and those who have helped make this part of the culture. And I appreciate the auditor's review of this. I think it's definitely highlighted some opportunities for improvement, especially with regard to categorization. You know, as I look at the numbers with regard to I think the most Well, one of the significant measures is the camera lens being blocked, and to have 6 of that and 5 caused by really a wardrobe choice, I think is very positive. And I assume with that one case, I think, is that the one that you described where they were taking the report and had it under their arm? You had referred to training opportunities, and I assume that was one where you then informed people via a memo or something that, be careful about where you put this so that it doesn't block.
And I think that
the
most
camera.
officers are very aware. The camera, they're starting to become so used to wearing the cameras that they're careful about slinging a rifle, for instance, in front of that camera, because then the rifle will actually block the camera lens, or doing this to where they're getting very good at it. So generally, we see that very small number of times, and we're addressing it with the officers to make sure that that is not happening.
So I guess my question for the auditor concerns page 5 of the report. There's a statement, the review of body-worn camera videos revealed that officers are generally using their cameras according to policy. However, many videos are not started and stopped properly. Camera view is often blocked, and video categorization is not added consistently and accurately. I think the last point I would agree with. The video categorization seems not to be consistent, and you've addressed how you're altering that going forward. But the camera view being often blocked, I was just wondering if I was missing something. We had talked about, because there were 6 cases identified. I guess, what is your measure for, are you looking for comparison to other departments that are using body-worn cameras in their assessment? Or, if I had just read these numbers, many videos are not started and stopped properly, and camera view is often blocked, I probably would have expected higher numbers to reveal themselves in the...
Sure. The camera view is often blocked. As it states in the report, we saw many cases throughout every video where the officer blocked it briefly with their notebook as they're writing something, or maybe with their e-ticket writer. And so we did see several cases where I would say, where the camera is often blocked throughout the video. Those 6 were the ones where that significantly blocked it in a way where you missed portions of the video.
I would suggest, especially on a topic like this seems, again, camera view, the assertion that camera view is often blocked doesn't necessarily capture the nuances you've just explained to me. And so I would just suggest I would just make that observation.
I think that's language we can adjust. I think what we were trying to portray in the audit is that while we saw it blocked multiple times in many videos throughout our 151 that we observed, that the ones that we were most concerned about were not like somebody briefly covered their camera, but more there was a long period of time, several minutes or even I think up to 40 minutes that were covered. And so those were concerning. Those were the ones that we included in our percentages. We can certainly add that nuance.
Yeah, and I think the ones you're describing where they're significantly blocked are of concerns for all of us, for all the reasons that have been stated. And I appreciate that those are being focused on, either for training opportunities. With regard to the categorization, how does that, so that impacts when they're miscategorized, they are not necessarily retained as long as they need to be. Do we have a sense with the universe, with the kinds of categorizations that were being misapplied, how that impacted the retention schedule? What is something like, can you give us some examples of what something should have been categorized as and what it was categorized as and how that impacted the retention schedule?
Sure. We saw several examples of that. In fact, all of the ones that are listed as miscategorized in this report were categorized at a lower retention rate than they should have been kept at. So that could be a case that was categorized as a police event, which will mean it will stay for that 181 days, but maybe it was supposed to be categorized as a 5-year or a 10-year. And so we're looking at keeping it for the complaint period, which is good, but not keeping it for the full retention period for that evidence.
And is there any more detailed information within our report?
Not within the report. We have that we could provide
I think that'd be interesting to see, but I also wonder too if that's while you're working on training for better categorization, is there a way to set the default so that it automatically retains for the 5 or 10 year retention schedule rather than the lowest? So that if there is a mistake, there's a mistake that errs on the side of retaining it for a longer period of time.
So to that point, the default is indefinite retention. So if an officer fails to categorize a video, it's automatically retained indefinitely. What the problem we run into is that an officer might have meant to put it for 5 years, and in fact he put it for 2, or he put it for 2 purposefully when it should have been retained for 5, and those are where we're constantly having to. It's very hard for us to, because we don't have as many. We can't go by every single title code in the penal code to say, if this is what the call is, this is how long it should be retained. We depend on the officer's knowledge, because there's so many, to know, okay, this is a state jail felony, this is a 3rd-degree felony, these are the statute of limitations, and so this is how long they should be retained for. And that is an ongoing training that we have to have with our officers to make sure that as we see those, what's good is that, to my knowledge, we haven't lost one. We haven't had one roll off that in fact, we lost a case or something like that.
So the 5%, so what you're saying is the 5% of the videos that were not categorized would have been automatically retained indefinitely. So we're...
No, not necessarily, because those were, if they're miscategorized, say as a 2-year and it should have been a 5-year retention, then those could have rolled off at 2 years. What I'm saying is that if an officer does not categorize one at all, then that rolls to an indefinite.
Yeah, I think that was the 5%. I think that was the difference between the 5% and the 12%, right? The 5%. If we could see that slide with the percentages again, it's on page 2. So as I understand what you're saying, the 5% of the videos that were not categorized then would have been indefinitely retained. The 12% that were not categorized correctly might have been, and often were, it sounds like, categorized at a lower level, at a lower level retention schedule.
Yes, taking a look at this now, I see where you were headed with that, and you're correct.
Okay, thank you. And that's a training issue.
Yes, it is.
That you're working on. Okay. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think that's all my questions.
Thank you. I want to join my colleagues in thanking the APD leadership and the officers for embracing this new technology. I know there were a lot of growing pains, and part of what this audit reveals is some of the things that we still need to work on, and I think there's value. So thank you to the audit staff for moving this forward. Some of the things that I'm really interested in learning about is how we're using the footage in our training. Now, you mentioned a little bit about how you're using footage with respect to training folks on the cameras, but are you able now to use this footage when you're training officers to improve their effectiveness in other ways?
Brent, can you speak to that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Yes. So we have body-worn cameras issued out at training to train incoming cadets not only on the functioning of the camera, on how that camera works, but then they can also categorize that video as a training video and then go back and watch that. Any video that a sergeant on a shift deems that they would like to review for training purposes can pull that up in a show-up type atmosphere where they can then show their shift the footage of that video and use it for training purposes, and our policy covers how that is handled.
And are you finding that, is that a practice that's being used at this point?
Yes, so far we've gotten great feedback on not only the view of the camera, but the footage and quality that it provides, and that we've spoken to many shifts who are incorporating the footage that on the cameras into their training programs.
Right. It's great to see that there's value beyond the transparency, that there's also the value for the training and helping our officers to be more effective and to have some more examples of things. There were a couple points within the audit that I wanted to delve a little bit deeper on. So it says that it gives a percentage of videos uploaded within 30 days of creation. Now the policy is they're supposed to be uploaded that night. So the fact that there's any that are not getting uploaded that night is a breach of the policy. I'm particularly concerned about the 26 videos in this sample that were not updated within the 180 days, and we see that number 180 in a lot of different places. So how is it that they're not even getting uploaded if they're supposed to go back with their shift and upload it? How does that happen?
So I brought that very point up with the auditors because they had highlighted that number, the 26 videos, to us. We asked for the case numbers, we investigated it, and what we found was that 14 of the 26 belonged to one officer. 13 were recorded on the same day, and one was recorded the following day. When we looked into that camera had malfunctioned, and we had sent it off to be repaired. When we send it off to the vendor, of course, there's the shipping time, there's the time that they put it in queue to actually look at it and to see what's wrong with it, and then what they do is they upload it into a tenant where it's housed until it can be moved to our tenant. That delay was over 180 days. So that was 14 videos. We had one video that was a training video that was, as Commander Dupree was talking about, was not part of our normal protocol. It was out at the training academy. The remaining videos were all on devices from various officers that had malfunctioned. So out of the 26 videos, none of them it sat on somebody's desk or in somebody's car or wherever, and they failed to upload it. These were all, with the exception of the one training video, these were all devices that had failed. We brought that to the attention of the auditors. I'm not sure why they included that figure in the end report.
What page is that on?
It is on page 9. I have some additional questions, but the auditor want to speak to that point.
I would just say we completely understand that it was a software issue, that there were issues that happened. But from our perspective, where we're looking at it from this means that the videos really never existed. By the time they were uploaded, they were immediately queued for deletion. And so they basically don't exist. And so for us, that was a problem. Not so much that a software malfunction occurred, but that it took more than 180 days to detect that, or really significantly more than 180 days. By the time that we looked at those, they were gone. So I understand the reason, but we still felt like it was worth highlighting in the report because it does mean that those videos were not captured for future reference.
So is there a way to, if you have a situation again, to change the policy so that if there's a malfunction that the clock starts over and we address that issue?
I'm sure that we could probably talk to the vendor about a way to make sure. I want to this is 26 videos over a 6-month period that they looked at. So out of approximately probably, $750,000 to 1 million videos, did we have this issue occur? When that video moves over to our tenant, it sounds like it would be queued for deletion because of its age. It would detect the age and the fact that maybe it's been tagged as a police event or something else and would auto-delete. That's something that certainly my unit can work with the vendor to see if we can remedy that.
I think that would be a good thing to do as a follow-up. And broadly speaking, as we're rolling out a technology like this is useful information that they're bringing, and we can learn from it, and we can improve the policy. I don't think anything in here suggests that there are major problems, but it is a learning process, a massive technology and cultural shift. And so we want to take what the auditors presented as an opportunity to learn and update the policy. The audit, my next question is with the audit, it focused really on sort of the sample of cases, which were not necessarily incidents of import that were going to be followed up with within the justice system, et cetera. What have you learned about the cameras in situations where you've had an incident and you've used the camera's footage in order to help? Are there findings from that have also informed changes to policy or things that we need to be paying attention to in those cases, which are probably far outnumber the number of cases that were looked at by the auditor for this audit?
I think I highlighted a couple of them earlier with regards to, making some changes about how we place the body camera and adding the extra body worn camera mounts to the exterior jackets and the new traffic vests to make sure that we're capturing the evidence. What I can say is that from the time that I saw the very first body-worn camera video that captured an officer-involved shooting, I realized this was a game changer. And this was something that was going to greatly increase the transparency for the public and for mayor and council, for our department on how we handle these kind of calls. And did we do everything that we could to de-escalate? All of those kind of issues, I think, are informed by the process, and the cameras have kind of fed into that. So it's an ongoing thing where if we see an officer that maybe did not de-escalate in a situation in which, say, there was a response to resistance, then we're taking that opportunity to highlight not only with that officer and take any disciplinary measures that are necessary, but also with using it as a training opportunity for other officers to say, what could we have done better here?
Thank you. You mentioned earlier that we had a model program and we were being used as an example with other cities. I'm curious, though, what we're learning from other cities. I understand it may just be as often the case for Austin that we're a little bit out ahead. But how are you learning from other cities and in terms of adjustments that we may make to our program moving forward?
What we do is attend conferences with other, with other departments to talk about things such as our body-worn camera program and other types of technology that we employ to look at what are the best practices. And I really think that this is how Department of Justice and NIJ and others develop those best practices is to look at different programs and figure out where are the shortcomings, where are the shortfalls in them, and let's highlight those and put them into these model policies. And so I don't know if Commander Dupree wants to talk necessarily because he attends most of those conferences.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We've also have contacts at other departments in their technology units, such as San Antonio, Fort Worth, LAPD, who we reach out to when we encounter an issue, such as the mounting issue. We reached out to several departments to say, how are mounts on your body cams affecting you, and what are you guys doing about it? So mounting was an issue that we've seen in the departments that we have contacts in. Categorization is also another one that we're reaching out to other departments, and they're providing us input that they're having a pain point with categorization as well. So with those things, any kind of issues that come up, we ask for what their policies are. We try to compare them to our policy. And then through the grant-funded portion of our program, we had a contact at the Department of Justice. So they reviewed our policies when we were implementing our program. And so anytime we have a policy question, we will also reach out to our DOJ contact to see what's being done from their perspective nationwide on body-worn camera programs and have them look at the changes that we are thinking about implementing.
Great. Thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion. Councilmember Poole moves to adopt the audit. Is there a second? Councilmember Tovo. Any other comments? Councilmember Tovo.
I have a quick question. In answering our chair's comments, there was the transcript captured you saying something about 750,000 videos fell into the category that you were describing of videos that hadn't been uploaded or had run into technical issues that prevented them from being uploaded. Was that accurate?
What I was trying to highlight was that the city auditor's audit looked at approximately 6 months worth of video, I believe, and over that time, that's approximately how many videos were uploaded.
About 750,000.
Yeah, it's just a ballpark figure. I would have to actually look at it to get you the actual number, but out of that that big number, we saw 26 videos that were, with the exception of the one video that was a training video, were really hardware issues.
I just wanted you to clarify that because again, the way it sounded, it sounded like a larger number, like a much larger number. So, okay, thank you.
We should clarify, though, that they didn't look at the $750,000.
Right, they looked at 100.
The videos, they looked at the 151 or so.
Actually, for
video.
the purpose of that, they did look at all the videos.
Oh, they did?
They
Okay.
did.
Oh, okay. Great. Thank you for that clarification. So all those in favor of the motion? Mayor?
I'm unclear with respect to the issue that Councilmember Tobo raised, that one paragraph, I think really is not descriptive of it, and if someone was reading that report later, I think they would affirmatively leave with a different impression. So just to put in a qualifier in the final report as it issues that explains that nuance, I think would be really helpful for the record.
Right, and that's the issue.
On
think
page
was
5.
That's the line about 5.
Often
the,
blocked.
The many videos not started and stopped, and the camera view is often blocked. You know, we didn't talk much about many, but I do have, I guess I have a similar question about that. You know, the percentage for those that were started and stopped, started late or stopped early. You know, again, I'm not sure rises to the level of many there. but-
Sure, and,
but,
and we agree that we'll look at the language there and make sure that we add the nuance that we discussed here today. Whether or not that's many or not, I think we need to add that, while the camera view may be periodically blocked, what we were concerned about for the purposes of the audit were really those lengthy blockages.
So is there any objections to the direction to adjust that being added? Seeing none, are we ready to vote, or do you want to add?
Yeah, I guess the question is sort of how does that happen? Like, does that happen?
Well,
in-
this is
what
a draft. This is a draft report. So before finalizing the report, we would make those updates. We can share those with the committee if you'd like before we finalize the report. But the idea would be that we would take that input from the committee and incorporate it into the final report. Thanks.
I believe at this point, the draft report is not public because it's a draft, was shared with the committee so that we could review it beforehand. Is that?
It is posted as backup.
It is
so
posted,
as
okay.
of yesterday, it was posted as
Okay.
backup. But still with the big draft stamp, and we can definitely make changes prior to finalizing.
Great, thank you. All those in favor of the motion? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.